Welcome to the Taped Podcast, the most lonely podcast in the world. We are your hosts, myself, Michael.
And me, Miho.
And for today's episode of the Taped Podcast, we're just doing the usual 3 new albums, 1 classic. And we've got a good lineup of albums to talk about today. We got Fiona Apple with Fetch the Bolt Cutters. Sawayama by Rina Sawayama.
I forgot I do. Ooh.
You do the... Alright, so yeah. Fiona Apple, Fetch the Bolt Cutters.
Woo.
Rina Sawayama's new album, Sawayama. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah.
Song for Our Daughter by Laura Marling.
Woo.
And for our classic, we have The Beatles with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Banana now.
Right, so without further ado, let's get into it. Which one do you want to start with first?
Should we do the big one?
Yeah, let's do Fiona Apple. Alright.
Yeah, you cut off just there.
Yeah, I didn't cut off. I didn't say anything. I was waiting for your synopsis.
Okay. Yeah, I thought you cut off. Fiona Apple is a singer-songwriter and pianist from New York, USA. She's well known for releasing several highly acclaimed albums throughout the years, and Fetch the Bolt Cutters is her 5th studio album, and it's her first in 8 years. And as most of you know, it has been met with pretty insane critical acclaim.
It has. I've seen the whole hype around this, so when I found out we were reviewing it, I was beyond excited because, you know what, I have everything to be excited about. The reviews seem great, and this is the first Fiona Apple album that I've listened to, so this will be an interesting take. Yeah. I do want to check out more of her work maybe after this. So
for sure, I have to revisit for sure.
Without further ado, let's get into it. First track is I Want You to Love Me. And it opens up with like these weird synth drums and into this kind of like piano instrumental. It's pretty obscure in terms of production. You know, Fiona's vocals are great. They get really like rough and really gruff like later on in the track. But at the same time, this shit confuses me. Like,
what way?
I don't know what she's talking about. I may be stupid for saying that, but I like it either way. Don't murder me.
I think the lyrics on this track are about being like one with nature and whatnot, and resonating with it.
Ah, okay. And I still enjoy the track as a whole, even though I don't know what she's talking about.
There's a lot to dig in with her lyrics. None of them are really clear right off the bat.
Yeah,
really have to explore that aspect in more depth. The album I think opens up with a great track, one of my favorites if I'm being honest, and Fiona Apple just blew it out of the park here. The performance is incredible. The mixing throughout, the production, the instrumentation, everything is arranged beautifully, and it's honestly one of my favorite tracks right off the bat.
Sick. I gave this track a 9.
I gave it a 10.
Nice. Next track is Shamika, and the instrumental in this one, it's pretty weird to say the least. Like it's kind of scattered with the piano that it has going on, and there's other kinds of like sounds and shit going into it, and it's really obscure, but I really am intrigued by it. It's pretty unique to say the least, and it's alluring in a way. And and again, Fiona's performance was pretty cool. Again, pretty obscure, and still don't know what the lyrics are about per se. And I feel like an idiot every time I say that, to be fair. But that's just off. This is based off of my first listen. I still have more to go, so I'll probably have more time to dig into this shit. But as of right now, I'm still loving it. I think it is a brilliant track, and I'm loving it for its aesthetic and sound wise. And I'd say there's definitely more to dig in songwriting wise.
For sure. I think the instrumentation here is just brilliantly composed. There's a lot of subtle layers, and Fiona gives a very versatile performance as well. Chorus on this one is among the most memorable in the whole album. And yeah, as a whole, the song shows an incredible amount of character, complexity, and it's probably my favorite song in the album and one of my favorite songs of the year so far. I read into some of the lyrics, and apparently Shamika was a girl who went to her middle school, and she had a very vivid memory of Shamika used to apparently be a bully, and she had a very vivid memory of like her complimenting Shamika complimenting her and saying she's got potential. I don't know what that exactly means, but apparently that memory has stuck with her, and yeah, so this is what that song was based off of. It's very
it's very odd, but
Yeah.
it's pretty intriguing. I need to dig into this shit a lot more, to be fair.
Yeah, for sure.
I gave this track a 9.
I gave this an easy 10.
Alright, sick. Title track, Fetched Bolt Cutters. Similar to the previous track, the production is pretty obscure. It's really low key on this track, and it's got some cool kind of like dreamy kind of atmosphere going for it. From what I've seen, and again, Fiona gave a very good performance, and it's a really jittery kind of track and performance overall. I think like it's pretty off the wall, a bit jittery, and I really like it. Like I really like it. I don't know why. So it's really charming in a way, and I don't know. I just really fuck with this track quite a lot, and I think it's probably one of my favorites on the album.
Yeah, it's a brilliant track. The instrumental is very minimalist in a way, but it's also like quite off kilter, and like what it lacks in, I guess, grandiosity, I think Apple makes up for with a brilliant performance. Just the lyrics are very detailed, very well put together. They kind of explore breaking out of, metaphorical mental prisons and, speaking up for yourself. And it's, none of the lyrics are really clear off the bat. There's a lot to read into, to explore when it comes to her lyricism, and I think that's part of the charm here. It's a very well composed song, and yeah, it wouldn't be my favorite, but it is definitely an incredible song nonetheless.
Yeah, I gave it a 10.
I gave it a 9.
Under the Table. And this is another pretty good track. It's got good piano, it's got like a synthy kind of soundscape going on. The vocals again are pretty good. Again, very jittery, much like the previous track. The loudness in the instrumentation towards the end is pretty much the selling point of this track for me. I think it overall it just sounds great. Again, I think it's another great track.
Yeah, it's a really moody and atmospheric track, yet it's also very intricate and beautiful instrumentally. Fiona again gives an incredible performance. It's a very kind of strong-willed and rebellious song. It's about standing your ground, standing by what you think is right, and it's another fantastic song in my opinion.
I gave it a 9.
I also give it a 9.
Relay. The drums are pretty weird on this track, but they still sound pretty great. I like the way that they sound. It's pretty eerie in a way. It kind of adds to like a kind of like creepy atmosphere to the track in a way. And I did pick up lyrically, she's basically resenting a person for multiple reasons, you could say. And I know there's a lot more to dig in than just that, but at least I kind of picked up on the message from this one. She went a cappella at the end, which I thought was pretty cool. And it's another great track.
Yeah, the instrumentation is definitely odd. It's kind of got this almost exotic flair to it, and I think it's brilliantly put together and assembled. It kind of forms a tribal cacophony near the end as the song progresses, and the vocally and lyrically, it's incredibly memorable, especially the repeated fucking chorus. It's been stuck in my head for the last week. And it's an interesting line. It's I don't really quite understand it. The evil is a relay sport where the one who's burned turns to pass the torch. I tried to look into that line specifically, and apparently it's something she wrote in her scrapbooks when she was a teenager, and it stuck with her. And I think it means like when bad things happen to you, you tend to pass them on to other people. Yeah, and I just think this is a top 3 track on the album for me.
I gave it a 9.
I gave it a 10.
Rack of His. This one, I think this is another brilliant track on the album. It's got these kind of weird plucks or piano sounds in it, and the drums sound really great on this one. The rough vocals are really good at it. They scared the shit out of me. I'll be quite frank here. It's basically got something to do with the significant other, from what I'm interpreting. And overall, I like when this woman scares me. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, it's got very, very powerful instrumentation, and it's still very almost serene in a way. Despite that, I think Fiona gives a very passionate performance, and I would say that this is probably my least favorite track, but that's also not saying much because I really do love this album. But yeah, it's an odd tune, but I still do really like it.
I gave it a 10.
I gave it an 8. I almost said a fucking 11. I don't know what I was smoking.
If you said 11, then we would have fucking celebrated. Let's be real here.
Yeah.
Alright, next track is Newspaper. Again, another absolutely brilliant track. I love the heavy bass on it. The crashes are pretty sick. The drums sound great too. It's another really kind of eerie sounding instrumental. And again, Fiona was fantastic on this track. Again, I didn't really pick up on the lyrics, but I still think this was a absolutely fantastic track either way.
Yeah, it's got very powerful instrumentation again. Almost has this kind of weird industrial flair to it, even though it's still very organic, very, very much in her folk roots. And Fiona herself gives an equally powerful performance, and it's just another incredible track. It's definitely worth checking out.
I gave it a 10.
I gave it a 9.
Ladies. This one, it's got really like dreamy sort of synths, and the drums on it sound pretty sick as well. And again, Fiona gave an absolutely fantastic performance, and so far, none of these tracks have missed for me at all. This album has been fantastic so far, and it's still maintaining that with this track. And I don't have much else to say, but this is another great track for me.
Yeah, I agree. The track is very smooth, very lush, very calm, and the instrumentation is as well as smooth, is also very tight. And Fiona adds her own flair to the track. The memorable lyrics, especially the repeating of the ladies. Yeah, it's another brilliant track that. It's hard to kind of explain a lot of these tracks. You really just have to listen to this album yourself.
You do.
Mm-hmm.
I gave this track a 10.
I gave it a 10.
Heavy Balloon. It's got like really loud drums on this track. They sound great. The vocals sound fantastic on this one as well. They got like a mix between like, just standard and like normal vocals to like loudness and pure fucking just loudness overall. It's still not a lot to say about it, but it's still a fucking fantastic track. Like, obviously this shit is kind of like hard to dig into a lot of the time, but overall I think it's another fucking great track.
Yeah, I agree. The instrumentation is very abrasive, yet at the same time it's very mystical, very lush, and Apple gives one of her best performances I've ever heard from her. There's a lot of heart, so much power, so much intensity, and it's easily another highlight for me, and another one of the best tracks on the album.
I gave this track a 10.
10 for me as well.
Alright, Cosmonauts. It's really, really good. Again, Fiona Apple has not missed once on this album for me. The distant drums in the background sounds really cool. The pianos are sick. I would like to say that it's a bass there, but I don't really know because I have that as a question mark in my notes. The vocals again are absolutely sick, and there's actually some pretty nice like ethereal background vocals in there too. They really add to the track quite a lot, and it's like you're in space, as like Cosmonaut would suggest, and I think it sounds great. It's probably one of my favorite tracks on the album.
Yeah, the instrumentation is incredible. It's very angelic, very ethereal, as you said, and Apple gives an equally incredible performance, one of the best of her career again, and lyrically brilliant, very memorable, just sticks with you, and this is probably my second favourite track on the album.
Alright, I gave this track a 10.
I also give it a 10.
For her, this is another fantastic track. The distant clapping and the heavy bass on it sounds really nice. There's lots of vocal layering. I can't actually speak. There's decent vocal layering on this track. It adds to the track. And I really enjoy that like ethereal ending towards the end of the track. I think it actually sounded fantastic. And overall, it's another fantastic track for me.
Yep, I completely agree. It's a very energetic track. I mean, a lot of the previous tracks have been a bit more on the quieter side, a bit more on the more calm side. And this, brings the album back into the swing of things on tracks like Relay. And the vocals are incredible. There's some really, really heavy lyrics on this one. There's that one line that just hits like a ton of bricks. And I don't really want to paraphrase. I think everyone should listen to this song as well. In particular, it's really good. It's I'm a bit lost for words.
I gave it a 10.
I gave it an easy 10.
Drum set. Drums.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, the drums are decent on this track. It's got a pretty repetitive chorus, which kind of drags it down a bit, but I do think that the vocals are pretty good overall. I think it's another solid track on the album. It wouldn't be one of my favorites.
Yeah, I think it's another great song. It's largely centered around Fiona's performance, which as per usual is incredible. And here's a little fun fact for you. In the last few moments of the song, as she's singing her final lines, you can hear her starting to laugh, and it's actually because her dog jumped up on her when she was recording. There's a fun fact.
That doggo seems to be very prevalent on this album. Good doggo.
For sure.
I gave this track a 9.
I give it a 9.
Final track is On I Go. I think that the drums are pretty sick on this one. It's pretty disjointed in nature, and there's like so much going on in this instrumental, and it's kind of like what's the word? I can't speak today. What is wrong with me? No, it's really disjointed in nature. There's so much going on. It really just gets you soaked into it. And again, Fiona was good on this track. It's not one of my favorite performances from her on the album, but it's still a pretty solid ending to the album overall.
Yeah, I think it's a great closing track. It's very dark, it's very ominous, and the vocals from Fiona are almost chant-like, and they definitely, leave a lasting impact on the listener as the instrumentation begins to quiet out and the album just slowly closes. And yeah, I think it's another brilliant track.
I gave it a 9.
I gave it a 9 as well.
Overall thoughts and opinions on Fetch the Bolt Cutters by Fiona Apple. Well, this certainly lived up to the hype, to say the least. For sure, it lived up to the hype for me, at least. I thought that it was a really unique album from anything that I've ever heard. The production is so, different. It sounds like it has, a homemade kind of a feel to it, and that makes it really raw. And Fiona Apple's performances throughout the album were absolutely fantastic. I really liked her use of different kind of vocals. Like, there's moments of vocal layering, there's rough and really rough vocals, there's moments of somberness, and it's actually pretty cool. And I really do find this to be charming. Like, her style of performing is really enchanting, and same goes for the instrumental front. Lyrically, there's a lot to unpack in this album. I haven't digged fully into them, but I'm sure with more listens and more research, I will, understand everything. But as of right now, Fetch the Bolt Cutters is my album of the year.
I'll get to whether or not I agree in a second. Spoiler alert, I agree.
All that anticipation paid off.
Yeah, I seen this album was coming up and about to be released about 2 weeks before. I think she announced it earlier on, and I was kind of surprised by how little I seen people talk about it in the days leading up to its release. It's almost like people didn't know that Fiona Apple was coming back, after 8 years. But I was definitely excited. I've always enjoyed her music, but I was never the biggest Fiona Apple fan, but this has definitely won me over completely. And in my eyes, it's easily her best album. I'm definitely gonna have to revisit The Idler Wheel and Tidal, which are the 2 albums I've heard from her previously, but this album is incredible. It's not too dissimilar in its structure to albums like Fetch. No, what am I talking about? The Idler Wheel. It's not too dissimilar to albums like The Idler Wheel, and it sees her definitely play to her strengths. But here, I think Fiona has just had her most sharp, witty, powerful, measured, and just this whole album has this vibrancy, this emotion to it that isn't quite captured on anything else I've heard from her, or anything else I've heard much of, period. It's a really, really, special album that doesn't really come out very often. I think that before listening to the album, I thought the hype was a bit fucking nuts. I definitely didn't think that it was going to live up to it. And sure, I don't think it's a 10 like everyone else is saying, but I still think it's an incredible piece of music. It's poetic, it's beautiful. Her lyrical ability throughout just shines through. And yeah, it's an album that it's hard to forget anytime soon. It's gonna get a good few listens out of me, to say the least.
Same here. Overall score, I gave this album a decent 9.
I gave it a light to a decent 9.
Alright, moving on.
Yeah, album of the year also. It is my album of the year. I didn't just say that as a joke.
Alright. Moving on to our next one, I think we can do Sawayama.
Alright. Rina Sawayama is a singer-songwriter from Niigata, Japan, currently based in London. Sawayama is her debut studio album and a follow-up to her critically acclaimed debut EP from 2017 titled Rina.
And this seems like a sequel to that EP because, it's titled Sawayama.
I wonder why. But yeah.
Alright, opening track is Dynasty. The instrumental is really energetic. It's dramatic as hell as well. A tad bit overproduced in some aspects, but the guitar riffs are pretty sick on this one, if I'm being real here. Again, Rina's vocals are fantastic on this track, in my opinion. They're impactful. I think there was a lot of passion put into them, and she's good. And the chorus is pretty on this track too. And overall, I think it's a pretty decent opener to the album.
Yeah, I think it's a very strong opener. It's very grandiose for a pop track, and Rina gives a very good vocal performance. I love the breakdown. I think the use of guitar and acoustic drums is very, very well integrated into the song. It kind of feels like an 80s arena rock meets pop track, and yeah, I do really enjoy it.
I gave it an 8.
I also give it an 8.
Excess. Opens with guitar riffs into like a pop instrumental. It's really reminiscent of that Poppy album that came out earlier this year, and yeah. I think it's good. Like, I enjoyed that Poppy album, so obviously I'd like this. And this kind of pops in and out in the instrumental each time, and I think it sounds really good. And Rina gave a solid performance as well. She matched the instrumental very well, in my opinion.
Yeah, the track sounds like it's straight out of the 2000s for me. I think it's a very good track. Rina gave a very good performance. Chorus is quite unique, very interesting, but also very catchy. And the burst of, distorted guitar chords are pretty interesting in, this kind of track. Yeah, I like it.
I gave it an 8.
I also give it an 8.
Now, next track is STFU. It opens with like a really fucking aggressive like metal riff, and I think it sounds great. And this kind of theme continues through the majority of the track. It kind of contrasts with the like kind of like sweet vocals that Rina brought in. I really enjoy the really bright chorus, and the laughing at the end was a bit of a nice touch, you could say. It's a bit weird, but I thought that was kind of cool. And this track definitely sounds like it could have been on I Disagree, but I think it's probably better than like half of the songs on that album, in my opinion.
Yeah, I do see that. Kind of poppy aspect to the track. But yeah, I think this is definitely integrated. The metal aspects are definitely integrated a lot better into this track than they were on a lot of the tracks on Poppy's album, in my opinion. Rina's vocals, I think, heavily carry the track for me. They're really, really powerful. The transitions between the bright chorus and the darker verses actually doesn't feel awkward. It feels quite smooth, and I do really enjoy this track.
Alright, I gave this track a 9.
I gave it a 7. What?
Nothing. Alright, next track is Comme des Garçons. And this track, it's got like a really like bouncy like dance beat. It's kind of reminiscent of like a early 2000s kind of contemporary pop kind of vibe, and I actually really enjoy it. I think that Rina had a pretty solid performance, and the chorus feels pretty nostalgic for some reason. I don't know. Like, kind of reminds me of like an old school, like, I don't know, fucking Britney Spears song or some shit.
Yeah, this is probably a top 3 track for me, at least. I think the instrumental is fantastic. It's very bouncy, very fun, but also quite abrasive. The chorus is brilliant. It's very catchy. And I think Rina gives a very confident, very fun performance. Production throughout this track is brilliant. And this was like the only single I actually heard from the album leading up to its release. And I enjoyed it then. Still love it now. Yep.
I didn't hear any of the singles coming up to the album's release.
I listened to this one when it came out, I think in January.
Alright, I gave this track an 8.
I gave it a 9.
Sick. Akasaka Sad. It's got another pretty like bouncy instrumental. I think it's pretty good. And, you know, Rina did her thing on this. She gave a pretty solid performance, but overall, it's not really one of the more memorable tracks on the album compared to some of the great ones that I got beforehand.
Yeah, I do agree. It's got some interesting, very glitchy performance. Rina, again, gives a very interesting, very well performed vocal performance, but the chorus, while it is odd and I do like it, is a bit... I think it's a bit too odd, and I don't know how well it fits with the rest of the track. It's definitely one of the more experimental tracks on the album. It's far from the best, but I still think it's a very good track.
Alright, I gave this track a 7.
I also give it a 7.
Paradisen. I really like the fast-paced instrumental on this track. I think it sounds pretty good. It's got like kind of an old school kind of video game vibe, like a 90s like Nintendo console or some shit like that. But it sounds fantastic. The saxophone in this instrumental sounded great as well. I'm a sax man, so that shit always wins me over. And I thought that the chorus was pretty great. I absolutely loved the chorus on this track. And I thought that Rina as a whole gave a very good performance on this track. And overall, I think it's a very solid track.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably my second favorite track on the album. The production is very synthy, very energetic, and Rina gives an equally energetic performance. Chorus is brilliant, and instrumentally, it's also very solid, very well produced throughout. And you know, the performance from Rina is just fantastic. She's a very good singer, and also a very good performer. And this is a brilliant track.
Overall, I gave this track an 8.
I gave it a 9.
Love Me For Me. It's a really groovy instrumental. It's got kind of like a funk edge to it, and I think it sounds pretty sick. I really enjoy it. And again, Rina gave a very satisfying performance. She did her thing on here, matched the instrumental very well, and that's all I really have to say. I think it's a pretty good track.
Yeah, I think it's, once again, another great track. Production is very clean, but also it's quite layered, quite intricate. I think Rina gives a very good vocal performance, and I would say it's probably the most commercially accessible track on the album, but I really don't mind. I still think it's brilliant. Yeah, another great track.
I gave it an 8.
I gave it an 8.
Next track is Bad Friend, and it's pretty atmospheric. It's got a really synthy instrumental, and I love later on when they just input that like little gospel moment in there. Thought that was a pretty nice touch. And I think this is one of the better lyrical performances from Rina on the album. You know, the title says it all. It's about, you know, feeling guilty about quote unquote being a bad friend and all that sort of stuff. I think it was really heartfelt. It was very potent. I think that it came from the heart, and I think it's probably one of the best tracks in the album for me. I really enjoy where Rina went with this song in particular.
Yeah, I agree. It's a brilliant track. The instrumental is very subtle, almost kind of ambient in some ways. Rina gives a very, very pretty vocal performance on the verses in the beginning, and as the track builds up, you know, it adds more layers to the track, and in turn it adds more intensity until the final chorus, which is brilliant in my opinion, and it's well worth the build up. And yeah, it's a great track.
I gave it a 9.
I gave it an 8.
Next track is Fuck This World Interlude, and since it's an interlude, I didn't score it, and it doesn't really feel like an interlude. It just feels kind of like a leftover track that's just being passed off as an interlude, in my opinion. Because, you know, it's got another like atmospheric and synth instrumental. Like, it's decent enough, I suppose. And, you know, Rina gave a decent performance, but like, it's not that good of a track. It's not that memorable for me, at least. And it feels like a bit of a throwaway, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think it's one of my favorites. I still think it's a good track, and I think the production is brilliant, but I think that the vocals are a bit washed out in the mix, and as a whole, it just wouldn't be among my favorite tracks on the album.
Yeah, I didn't score it.
I scored it. I give it a 7.
Alright, Who's Gonna Save You Now? And this is like top 2 on the album for me. I really love the very epic and grand instrumental. The synths are pretty fuzzy. I love that aspect of it. The riff at the end was absolutely fantastic. And Rina gave probably her best vocal performance on this song. I thought it was fantastic. The chorus was absolutely great. And near the end of the track, she just popped off. Her vocals are fucking amazing at the end of it. I think overall, this is a fucking brilliant track. And it really does showcase Rina's talent as a vocalist. I really love this track.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing song. It's very powerful, both instrumentally and vocally. And again, I think it really sounds like an arena rock track from the 80s meets contemporary pop. And I think that's a really entertaining fusion. And I agree with who said Rina gives, I think, one of her best ever performances. And this for me is a top 3 track.
I gave it a 9.
I also gave it a 9.
Tokyo Love Hotel. It's got a nice little synth pop instrumental and I really enjoy it. I love the sweet chorus on this as well. And Rina was pretty great too. And she gave a pretty good performance. And her lyrics can be interpreted as like an ode to her home country. And I can really respect that. And I think that it is another shine of lyrical moment on this album. And yeah, overall, I think it's a very solid track.
Yeah, this is my favorite track on the album. I think it sounds like it could be a Carly Rae Jepsen track, and I don't think I could give much of a better compliment to any pop song these days. The production is incredible, very synthwave inspired, and Rina's performance, again, need I say more? It's fantastic yet again. The vocals really match the kind of nostalgic qualities of the instrumental perfectly, and it's just comes together to be one of my favorite tracks of the year.
I gave this track an 8.
I gave it a very strong 9.
Very good. Next is Chosen Family. I think the instrumental on this track is very good. I love the somber, very low-key and minimal feel of it. I think that it sounds pretty good. And Rina had a very great performance on this track. It was very emotional. There was passion in it. And overall, her lyrics are pretty impactful here too. And I think it is another brilliant track. It's top 5 on the album for me, I would say. I got a fair few great tracks in this album.
It's probably my least favorite track on the album. I still think
it's
very good. Yeah, I still think it's very good. The instrumental is very minimal, and the track is largely based around Rina's vocals, which I think are fantastic, but I think the song as a whole doesn't really explore that much territory, and it does seem to overstay its welcome, in my opinion. Still think it's a good track, but just compared to the rest, I wouldn't really rate it highly.
I gave it a 9.
I gave it a 7.
Okay. Next track, the final track is Snakeskin, and I think it's a pretty weak closer to the album. I think that it has like a kind of EDM kind of formula to it in like the pattern that it goes in, and I think it's alright. It's just a bit predictable, and Rina gave a solid performance. She again had a pretty great performance, just the instrumental kind of held it back for me on this one, but overall it's a decent track. It's probably my least favorite on the album, apart from the interlude.
I think it's a decent track. It's definitely interesting. I think the bass in this track is very in your face, and it gives the track a lot of energy, and Rina matches that pretty damn well. The track, I think, just isn't as strong as a lot of the other tracks, in my opinion, even though it is still good. I just wouldn't rate it highly again. But yeah, it's a good closer.
I gave it a 7.
I gave it a 7.
Overall thoughts and opinions on Sawayama by Rina Sawayama. I think that this album was a great introduction to Rina's music. This was the first album that or project that I listened to from Rina, and she proved herself to me. I think that she gave some amazing performances on the album. There's some amazing, absolutely fantastic vocals on here. I think that there's a lot of good topical focus as well, and I can really appreciate that. And I do really enjoy a lot of the instrumentation on here as well. I think that Rina matched it very well. There's lots of cool kind of cross genre things that they did in here, like for example the adding in those like riffs and the moments of synthwave, and I think it's fantastic. Rina has a bright future ahead of her in music. I think she's definitely an artist that I'm gonna keep on my radar. This is probably my favorite pop album that's come out this year, and overall I think it is a brilliant album. No questions asked.
Yeah, I think this is certainly an album that plays to Rina's strengths. It's instrumentally very intricate, very ambitious, and incredibly well crafted. But what stands out to me the most is how, despite all this, Rina's voice never fails to shine. I think this balance between interesting and well put together instrumentals and just brilliant, passionate vocal performances is a formula for a great pop record, and this is exactly that, a great pop record.
Overall scores, I gave this one a light to decent 8.
I gave it a light 8.
Alright. Final album of the new releases, Song for Our Daughter, Laura Marling. You have a synopsis?
A brief one. Laura Marling is a British folk singer and songwriter. Song for Our Daughter is her 7th studio album.
Alright. First track is Alexandra. I think that the acoustic instrumental is pretty nice. It's pretty somber. It's got a cool vibe to it, and I think Laura matched that with pretty good vocals and some pretty decent songwriting too. I think that it's a pretty solid opener. There's not really much to say about it, but overall I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, I think it's a very strong opener. The guitar work is very pleasant. The violins and grandiose elements in the background of the song had a lot of depth to the instrumental, and Laura gives a really good performance. She's got a very powerful voice, and the song as a whole is very well written and suited to her voice, and I think it's a really strong opener.
I gave it an 8.
I also give it an 8.
Held Down. Again, it's got more of an acoustic vibe, and I think it sounds pretty good. I think that Laura's vocals, again, sound very good, very powerful, and I think the songwriting, again, is pretty solid too, and it's not my favourite on the album. I think it's the weakest on the album, but overall, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a pretty solid track.
Well, it's my favourite track on the album. I think it's a lot more musically diverse, in my opinion, than a lot of the other tracks. There's, the distorted guitar ambience in the background. The track is a lot more upbeat than a lot of the other tracks on the album. I love the songwriting, the vocals from Laura, and yeah, it is my favourite track on the album.
I gave it a 7.
I gave it a 9.
Alright. Strange Girl, again, acoustic. I think that the acoustics sound pretty good. And again, Laura gave a pretty decent performance. It's not one of my favourites on the album, and I kind of lost interest in the track towards the latter half, but it's a good track nonetheless.
Yeah, it's probably my least favorite track in the album. I think the instrumental is very upbeat and fun in a way, but as the track goes on, everything gets a bit stale for me. And yeah, I think it's a decent song. It's quite catchy, but I don't think it stands up to the test.
I gave this one a 7.
I gave it a 6.
Alright, next track, Only the Strong. Wait, no, we already did that. Did we?
No, we didn't.
Okay, Only the Strong. I love the somberness of the instrumental. I love how low-key it is. I think it sounds absolutely fantastic. And Laura's performance was great on this track too. I really loved her vocals on this one. The songwriting was pretty good too. And overall, I think it's another great track, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's very minimal and atmospheric instrumentally, and I love this subtle guitar work that really sets the mood for the track. The song to me sounds like it could be from, the Life is Strange soundtrack, and Laura gives a really, really pleasant performance to accompany that instrumental, and overall it's one of my favourite tracks.
I give it an 8.
Gave it an 8.
Blow by Blow. It's really nice piano instrumental. I love the sporadic strings in there as well. They sound very good. They add a lot to the instrumental. The vocals and the songwriting, again, are very good. And I love the moments of like choir-esque vocals there too. I think they add quite a lot to it as well. It's probably one of my favourite tracks in the album, and I really enjoyed it overall.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty song, but to me it's just a bit uneventful. The instrumentation is very lush, very somber, and it's incredibly well sung. Laura has a very powerful voice, but I cannot say that this track is just a memorable moment on a grand scheme of the album. It just doesn't stick out that much, and I think it's a problem a lot of the tracks have for me, is that they are pretty, they're all well composed and well sung, but they don't really stick out from one another to me.
I gave this track an 8.
I gave it a 7.
Alright, title track, Song for Our Daughter. Again, the acoustics are pretty good on this one. The strings are really good. The strings added a lot for me. I really enjoyed the somber vocals on this track as well. I think they complemented the instrumental very well. And I got another good track from this album.
This is my second favorite track, I think. It has another very minimal instrumental, and I think Laura does really well over these. She has a very entertaining voice, and her way of performing, really carries the song in of itself. But the instrumental here really sets the atmosphere and mood for the track, and Laura really does a good job over that. The song does progress quite a bit instrumentally near the end. The whole string section, the piano, the drums coming in, but it remains to be largely focused around her vocals, which are great, and the track as a whole is brilliant.
Alright, I gave this track an 8.
I gave it a 9.
Fortune. Again, another acoustic instrumental. I think it sounds pretty good. The vocals, again, are great from Laura. I think, again, they match the instrumental very well. The songwriting is pretty decent as well. Overall, another great track.
It's a pretty good track, but I can't say it's among my favourites. I think, again, it's largely carried by Laura's vocals. The instrumental, while, it does sound pretty, like a lot of the other stuff on the album, it does kind of doesn't do enough to stand out for me. And, other than the strings, which I think are very memorable within the instrumental, it does kind of sound like a lot of the other stuff on the album for me. But as a whole, I still think it's a good track.
I gave it an 8.
I gave it a 7.
End of the Affair. This is my favourite track on the album. I think that the acoustic instrumental sounds absolutely fantastic. I think that Laura's soulful performance is amazing. I think that it, like I said for previous tracks, it matched the instrumental very well. The songwriting on this one was very good as well. And yeah, it's my favourite track on the album.
I think, once again, vocally, I think it's probably her best performance on the album, but I think the track, again, for me, is just brought down by the instrumental, which I don't really find that entertaining. But definitely, I think is a track that is worth a listen due to just the power and intensity of her vocals. Yeah, I think it's very good, but again, wouldn't be among my favorites.
Alright, I gave this track a 9.
I gave it a 7.
Hope We Meet Again. Think that the acoustics are pretty solid. Laura had a pretty good performance. The lyrics are about someone that, she knew before, and basically reminiscing about that time. And I think that it's a very solid track, songwriting wise, vocal wise, and instrumental wise. So far the instrumentals have been very good, for me at least. I don't know about you, But yeah, I think it's another great track on the album for me.
Yeah, I think it's really, you could copy and paste what I said about the previous two tracks. I think that her vocals are fantastic and they're the best aspect of the song, but the instrumental, while it does have some looming, ominous moments, especially when it comes to the string section, just doesn't really stand out to me that much. But I still think it's worth listening because Nora's vocals really are great.
Alright. I gave this track an 8.
I gave it a 7.
Final track on the album, For You. And I really think that this is a great closer to the album. The humming in the background is good. We got those Kid Cudi vibes. The acoustic is really sick. Think that the Western guitar in there as well sounds really out of the blue, but it also blends very well with whatever else is going on in the instrumental. And Laura gave a very good performance. I think she was very good on here. Her songwriting again was pretty solid. Her vocals again were pretty solid. They matched the instrumental. And yeah, overall, a great ending to the album for me.
Yeah, I agree. It's a strong closer. I think the humming in the instrumental sounds pretty unique and interesting, and I do quite enjoy that aspect of it. I love the overdubbed vocal moments from Marling throughout the track. It gives it once again a bit of a unique flair and makes it stand out from a lot of the other tracks, in my opinion. And I love how the instrumental adds a lot, like, more new layers throughout as the song progresses. Like, there's wind instruments in there, that electric guitar. It's a very strong closer, in my opinion.
Alright. I gave this track an 8.
I also gave it an 8.
Overall thoughts and opinions on Song for Our Daughter by Laura Marling. I think that it's a pretty great album. I think that Laura held her own vocally and lyrically. I think that she gave a very, very solid performance. She's a pretty good performer and songwriter as a whole. I think that the kind of low-key, like, somber feel of the instrumentals on this whole album sound really good. I really like the kind of minimal approach to the production. I think it sounds really great, in my opinion. And I'd be interested to check out what else Laura has to offer.
Yeah, I think this album is very pretty and has fantastic vocals, as you would come to expect if you've listened to her previous works, which I have. But for me, it just doesn't really push any boundaries. Just in terms of her music or folk as a whole, I still think it's very pleasant. It's very enjoyable. It's got some fantastic moments, and although, yeah, it's not the most ambitious project I've heard all year, the fact that it is pretty and it's enjoyable to listen to is, at the end of the day, probably the most important thing when it comes to music. So I still did really enjoy this album.
Alright, I gave this album an 8, right on the dot.
I gave it a decent to a strong 7.
Alright. Now, favourite new release of the week? For me, it was Fetch the Bolt Cutters, Fiona Apple.
Yeah, I liked all the albums, but there was there was no discussion about, in my head, about what the best album was going to be. It's Fiona Apple. It's my favorite album of the year. Sorry,
yeah, we've had
Make that, you know that meme of the two Indian guys? Friendship ended with Dua Lipa. Now Fiona Apple is my new best friend.
And let's just keep it that way for
meme.
now. Crap, Facebook meme. Alright, moving on to our classic. We have the Beatles' iconic album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And for those of you who don't know, this is the first Beatles album that I've ever listened to. I've been going through their discography for the past few days now, and I'm getting the urge to do a worst to best on my own channel.
Do it.
I'm thinking of doing it. I'm doing Kanye first, okay?
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
Do it. Do it. Okay, track 1.
Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. I think this is a brilliant opener. The guitars sound really great. The drums absolutely slap. I love the brass that comes in as well into certain parts of the track. Paul's vocals are loud. They're energetic. They add quite a lot to the fun atmosphere of the whole thing. And I love when the group harmonized very well together. I think overall this was a very solid track, and, you know, it had me excited for what was to come for the rest of the album.
Yeah, the brilliant, energetic, groovy guitars really pull you in from the get-go. And at its core, it seems like a pretty simple rock track, but there's a lot of intricate layering in there, especially within the horn section. And it's just a very fun way to open up the album. And it also floats really well into the next track. It's a great track.
I give it a 10.
I also give it a 10.
With a little help from my friends, I was blown away by how much I loved this track. And when I looked up who was singing, I didn't even know this was Ringo.
Yeah.
I was surprised. And it was really good. I don't know what it was about it. I loved like the carefree, like very like happy atmosphere of the track. I love Ringo's performance, and I do love the group like vocals as well. They're kind of arranged in a way where it's like like the group is talking back to Ringo and Ringo is answering them and all that sort of stuff. I think that it's absolutely fantastic. The guitars are really cool. The drums are sick, and I loved the whole happy vibe of this. It actually made me feel so good inside when I listened to it. I really loved it.
Yeah, it's an iconic track, and it's easily the best, Beatles track fronted by Ringo Starr. There's no debate when it comes to that. It's just a really feel good track. It's got pleasant instrumentation. It's very iconic and memorable chorus, and honestly, it's one of my favorite Beatles tracks as a whole. And Ringo,
it's been mine. It's been stuck in my head for 3 days. I've been playing that on repeat for the past 3 days now. I've been loving it. Yeah. This track is a 10, easy 10.
Easy 10.
Alright, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. This one, I thought this was a pretty charming track. Like, before the chorus is like really slow. It's got really cool like bass sounds, like distant guitar melodies. And there's pitch correction on John Lennon's vocals. And I think they're really sweet. They kind of add to the whole like kind of blissful atmosphere of the track. Then when the chorus kicks in, it sounds absolutely fantastic. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it's a psychedelic rock classic, and despite what Lennon said, it's definitely about LSD. There's no debate there.
I mean, it has to be. It has that kind of trippy vibe. Like, it has to be.
It literally is. I think Paul at some point confirmed it, but John tried to say, "Oh no, it's about this picture this school kid I think drew, and I really liked it." But if you look at the title, Lucy, Sky, Diamonds, LSD, it's about LSD. And it's an iconic track. It's probably one of their most famous tracks. The organ during the verses fits the atmosphere perfectly. As Lennon describes, very vivid, dreamy, psychedelic imagery. The chorus is incredibly memorable. Everyone knows it. And there's just one thing that brought this track down for me always, and that's the mixing on John's vocals during the verses. It just doesn't sound that great. I think he's got a good voice, and the effects on his vocals just don't do it much justice, in my opinion.
I gave it a 10.
I gave it a 9.
Our next track is getting better. I love the bright sound in the instrumental. The bass is pretty cool. The chords are pretty sick. The bongos sound pretty nice as well, if I'm correct on that observation. John's performance was really weird in contrast to the bright and happy sounding instrumental. Like, in the lyrics, he's literally he basically says beating a woman. Or some
I think
shit
the
like that.
lyrics were from Paul, but John contributed
Paul?
that line. Yeah.
I kind of find it hard to distinguish between them sometimes. I don't know
I'll
why.
get used to it. You'll be able to.
Remember, new to Beatles music, by the way. I think that the group vocals, again, are very solid, and overall, another great track for me.
I think this is one of the Beatles' most underrated tracks, and honestly, it's probably a top 10 The Beatles track for me. And I rarely hear people talking about it. It's got very low-key instrumentation during the verses, and McCartney, with his memorable lyrics. The song brightens up during the instrumental, what am I saying? The song brightens up instrumentally during the chorus, and the chorus is very catchy, very memorable. The whole atmosphere of the track, despite some darker lines, is very optimistic and very hopeful, and it's always just been a fun track for me to listen to.
Alright, I gave this track a 10.
I gave it a 10.
Fixing a Hole. It's probably my least favourite track on the album. Personally, I don't really enjoy it that much. It's low-key in the instrumental, the guitar picking is pretty cool, and the drums sound great as well. And, group performances and vocal performances overall are pretty solid, but overall I didn't really find it as memorable as a lot of the tracks on this album.
Yeah, it's a very Baroque pop-inspired tune fronted by McCartney. I agree it's not the most memorable on the album, but I still think it's got some brilliant layered instrumentation, fantastic lyrics from McCartney, and yeah, I think it's a very good track.
I gave it a 9.
I give it a 9.
Alright, She's Leaving Home. I love the orchestral kind of instrumentation on this track. The harps sound pretty nice too. They stood out as well. And the vocals are really sweet on it as well. And I do like a lot of the lyrics on this too. I think that overall it's another great track in my opinion. I have nothing else to add to that.
It's a really pretty song. It's got fantastic orchestral instrumentation. The vocals from McCartney during the chorus are fantastic. Vocals throughout, just I think from everyone, just blend together perfectly. And it's a unique song for the Beatles at the time, as are a lot of tracks on this album. But this one always stood out to me as one of the best.
I gave this one a 10.
I gave it a 10.
Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite. It's a bit of a weird one. There's moments on it where it sounds like a bit of like a run through a messy circus at times. And I think it's pretty cool, but I don't think I'd want to go back to this track just for that kind of thing. Like, it's not bad or anything. I think it's pretty great, but I don't think it's as good as what else is on the album. Again, the vocals are pretty solid as well. Sometimes it can be a bit weird, but other than that, I think it's another good track.
Yeah, the musical inspiration behind this track is obviously circus music. I think the Beatles really take that aesthetic and blend it perfectly with psychedelic rock. I don't think there's a lot to discuss when it comes to lyrical analysis. It's just John Lennon singing lines from an old circus poster in his possession verbatim. The instrumentation on this track is really trippy. It's really psychedelic, and it's definitely a highlight for me. I like the tone of Lennon's voice. It really suits the psychedelic nature of the track, and as a whole it is definitely a highlight. It's definitely an odd one though.
I gave this track a 9.
I gave it a 10.
Within You, Without You. I've heard before that, the Beatles dabbled in Indian influence, and this is one of the first tracks I've heard where they actually where they had the Indian influence came in. And I think it's really cool. I think it's really cool to see different kind of cultures cultivated into pieces of music. And I think this track is a perfect example of that. The sitars I think sound great. The drums sound pretty cool as well. They have kind of an Indian flair to them as well. It's psychedelic as hell. And again, performances was great. Was it John on this track, or am I correct on that? It was
actually the only track fronted by George.
Oh, it was George. Okay, I think that George was really good on this, and overall, I think it's great. I think it's a really good track. I like the different kind of instrumentation they decided to go for.
Yeah, this track has definitely grown on me over the years. I can definitely appreciate, the track as a whole more than I used to, but I still wouldn't say it's among my favorites on the album. I respect the ambition of having a track so greatly inspired by Indian music, and being the only song George wrote and sung primarily on the album, it's quite a memorable track. I heard that it was inspired by, I think, a trip he took to India to meditate, and you can kind of see that reflected in the lyrics and obviously the instrumental.
Alright, I gave this track a 10.
I gave it a 9.
When I'm 64, this is probably one of the only Beatles tracks that I knew growing up, and I have nostalgia for it. It has kind of a weird jazz feel, if I'm correct on that. The horns are cool, the pianos are really nice, and John gave a decent enough performance. And, the song is basically, it's a love song about aging and all that sort of stuff. And, it's kind of corny in a way, but I still really like it. I think it's a really memorable track. I think it's, I definitely, knew this track before going into it. And I still think it's great. I have a lot of nostalgia for this song in general.
Fun fact right off the bat, McCartney was actually only 16 when he wrote this. It's an old one that he brought back for.
Wait, it was Paul who sang this, was it?
Yeah.
Or John? Fuck's sake! Why do I? like I said, new to the Beatles music. Don't fucking crucify me, please.
Yeah, and it's one of my favorite tracks on the album. It's a very simple song, very universally recognizable message, but I still think it's very poignant and it's very well written, and instrumentally it's very strong as well.
Alright, I gave this track a 10.
Another 10 for me.
Lovely Rita. This track has a really nice feel-good vibe. The bass is cool, the drums are pretty sick, the pianos are really nice as well. They're a nice touch to it. Again, who's performing on this track so I get it right?
Paul.
Paul was cool. Paul. And I think it's another love song. Nothing really memorable in terms of lyrics for me at least. But, it's good. It's a great song in my opinion.
I think it's another very underrated track. I don't think it's a very deep or poignant track. I think it's just very fun, very upbeat. It's about having a crush on a fucking meter maid. It's a bit random as well. And I think the chorus is very catchy. The song has definitely been stuck in my head, probably more than any other track on this album. And as you said, the piano section throughout is brilliant.
Alright, I gave this track a 9.
I gave it a 10.
Good morning, good morning. Love the distorted horns on this track. They sound really great. There's some good drums, there's some good bass, there's a sick guitar solo in there as well. And who's singing on this track again?
I think it's mostly John.
Thank God. John gave a cool performance, and at least my notes are right this time. John gave a pretty cool performance. I think that overall it was a great track, and it's another standout for me.
Yeah, it's a really fun track. The instrumental and the composition of the track are pretty unique. The brass and guitar solo are, I think, very underappreciated sections of the track, and they sound brilliant in my opinion. The good morning chants, I think, are very memorable. They really add to the psychedelia of the track, and I think it's another highlight for me.
I gave it a 10.
I give it a 10.
Alright, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band Reprise. It's basically the first track. And except it's like an encore, you could say, or whatever. A reprise. Yeah, and I didn't score it, but I still enjoyed it. I think it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I didn't score it either, but I think it's great, and it's a great throwback to tie the album together. But I think there's not a lot more to say other than the fact that I do love how this is. It kind of acts like a closer to the album. Obviously, it's a sequel to the first track, and it kind of emphasizes the final track as kind of an encore in a way, and I think that's really cool, and I do appreciate that this track is here for that reason. Alright,
moving on to the final track, A Day in the Life. The longest track on the album, if I'm correct on that.
I think so, yeah.
I think this is really good. I love this track quite a lot. The acoustic guitars sound fantastic, the drums and the bass are sick. There's a build-up of madness in the middle and the tempo increases. I think that is really cool. And I love the somberness in their performances from each member. Well, who's singing, for fuck's sake?
John and Paul and John.
All right. John and Paul were very good on here. I love the somberness, and the lyrics are basically just a day in the life of any random person, and yeah, I think it is another brilliant track and a brilliant closer.
This is my favorite Beatles song of all time, and it's one of my favorite songs of all time. Period. The lyrics from both McCartney and Lennon are very simple, but also very poignant to kind of describe situations happening in the news around them in that current date. And it's just, this track is incredible. The instrumentation is very calming during the verses, but that emphasizes the raising orchestral cacophonies that happen in between the verses that adds so much suspense and unease to the track. John actually brought in a whole orchestra into the studio on the final day of the recording to record those parts. He said that he wanted to those sections to quote unquote sound like musical orgasms, and I think he achieved that pretty well.
He did.
This track is a I don't know. I don't know what to say about it. Really, it's one of the best songs ever made, in my opinion.
Here's something you should say. This bitch a 10.
Oh god, if I could give 11, I'd give it an 11. It's a 10.
All right. That's it. Overall thoughts and opinions on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles. I'm very happy that I got to listen to this album at all, because I've been meaning to check out the Beatles for a long time. And, I've seen Sgt. Pepper's, the album cover all over the place when I was growing up. I heard Beatles songs growing up, and I'm finally glad I got around to listening to them. And I think this was an amazing way to start their discography. I love the various different types of sounds that they tried to incorporate into the instrumentals, like, the themes of like the circus, the Indian influence, the orchestras. I love a lot of the very happy tracks, and I fucking love the performances from everyone on here. And I really like the songwriting as well. I didn't the songwriting is pretty simplistic, but it's really catchy and really sticks with you. I think it is fantastic. I'm happy I got to check this out, and it made me check out loads more Beatles albums after. And hopefully I'll get to see a worst to best from me real soon, or maybe on this podcast.
Just this album for me has always stood the test of time, and I don't think there's ever been a moment in my life where I would say that Sgt. Pepper's isn't my favorite Beatles album. It's always been my favorite. I think there's very few albums to me that just sound this, I guess I would say, magical in a way. There's some sort of energy to these tracks that I don't think they've ever pulled off in anything else, in my opinion. It's always something that there's always something that brings me back to this album, and I always enjoy it. Like the first time I've listened to it, none of the tracks get old to me. In fact, a lot of the tracks have even, I've even grown fonder of them over time. Tracks like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds or Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite really explore that psychedelic route they were taking, and it's got this very mysterious atmosphere to them. And that contrasts really well with tracks like When I'm 64 or She's Leaving Home, that just are very emotional, very personal, and more, what's the word? Conventionally pretty.
Never mind.
And then there's also tracks like With a Little Help from My Friends or Lovely Rita, which are just straight up fun and always a joy to listen to. I think this album just explores a lot of different themes, a lot of different ideas and moods, and I think it does everything perfectly. And then there's A Day in the Life, which is the best song they've ever written, hands down for me.
Hands down. Yeah, I guess that's it. I gave this album a very strong 9.
I give it a very strong 9 to a 10.
Alright. Now, for next week's episode, we don't have any albums to talk about, considering it's been a bit of a slow week. So we are going to bring you another worst to best, this time on Mac DeMarco.
Woohoo!
And we will have a special guest on the on that episode as well.
Hell yeah!
And yeah, I
Bye.
guess. Wait, should I just plug our shit?
Oh yeah. Plug it.
All right. Rate your music and album of the year in the description, as well as my own channel, as well as Meow's channel. And yeah, bye.
Bye.